the Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week in a case relating to whether states have the right to restrict the use of medical intervention in transgender children. While the case focuses on an issue in Tennessee, it could immediately affect the laws in at least 20 states. Central to the debate is the question of whether states are discriminating by sex if they do not allow transgender interventions to continue. So, Ben, I got to ask, which way do you think that the Supreme Court is most likely to go?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. The court has been ruling in favor of conservatives recently, and we have some very good justices serving. So we'll have to see what happens. But again, I'm cautiously hopeful.
Yeah, and I think most of the reporting was that the conservative majority seemed prepared to uphold the law that allows restriction of minors. This won't come down fully down the pipeline until June or July of next year, so there is a little bit of time. But this also comes as Senator Roger Marshall's just introduced a bill to ban gender-affirming surgeries nationwide. So this would be even more than saying that it was a state issue. Now the Supreme Court might have to deal with the question of, can it be done on a federal level? And I think that's a totally different question.
It is. And, I'm a conservative Christian. I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the ban. I think even the medical institution that developed the surgery actually stopped performing it because they realized it wasn't creating the outcomes that they wanted, and it wasn't resolving the mental health issues that they were seeking to address. So I think if the institution that developed the procedure realized it wasn't working and stopped doing it, and combined with the fact that these surgeries are irreversible, it's really dangerous to allow this to happen, particularly with minors. But really with anybody, this is something that you can't fully come back from.
Yeah, and I think very important that the court and the ACLU lawyers admitted that transgender operations do not impact suicide rate. They said there's quote unquote no evidence. So no evidence whatsoever. And so often that there is this idea that they say, well, I would rather have, a daughter than a dead son. And I think that this has been horrible, fear mongering to parents in this country. And it turns out that that's not even correct. And that this does cause permanent damage. I think that's a travesty of the media. I think it's a travesty of social media. And I think it's a travesty that we've allowed it to go on as long as we have in this country. Ben, please go on. I apologize for steamrolling you, but it's a sensitive topic.
I was getting ahead of you because you went exactly where I was going, is that the whole narrative surrounding this is that it's a life-saving procedure because, the argument is that if these issues don't get resolved medically, then people might hurt themselves. But it seems like that isn't the case. Like, as you said yourself, there's no evidence to support that. And so there's basically a false narrative pushing this very dangerous and irreversible surgery on not just people generally, but on minors. And it's kind of weaponizing the love and compassion that parents have for their children against them.
Well, and I find this to be so similar in a lot of ways to, teenagers and young adults dealing with eating disorders. And if you took somebody who was anorexic and they said, I feel like I'm in the wrong body because my body, I hate it. I feel so uncomfortable in it. I wish that I was, extremely skinny or extremely whatever. There would be no medical reason to enable them to be in a body that they felt more comfortable in. The procedure instead would be to figure out what was causing this discomfort and to help them feel, more comfortable in their body. I think that this idea that we enable some version of, a mental illness, some version of a disordered thinking, right? Because you do have a natural born sex, and frankly, if you do these operations, it doesn't make you into the other thing. We don't have the ability to change your DNA. So it's sort of an approximation to make people feel more comfortable. And, the idea that we do this to children in particular, that we sterilize children with many of these medications, if a 12-year-old asked if she could have a hysterectomy, the answer would be absolutely no, because you might change your mind later on. But leftist ideology has become so ingrained in the youth of this nation. Ben, why do you think that is? Like, why is it that girls are more likely to transition than boys? Like, what has happened to our youth that this is the situation that we're in?
So I have a few thoughts here. First of all, I think this is the logical progression of the trend we've seen over the past few centuries of changing where someone's identity lies. So in the past, identity was very tied to objective external markers. So the family you belong to, the country you're a part of, who your king is, your religion, these kind of external affiliations or things that you have that externally imbue you with your identity. But over time, we've seen this moving of identity inward. So I decide who I am. I create the person that I am, and everybody else has to go along with that and affirm and acknowledge who I say I am, stemming from the inside. And I think that's very tied to American individualism. And I think that's part of why this is so dangerous. I think the example you cited of the anorexic individual is very apt, because you're basically saying, okay, there's the subjective internal and there's the objective internal. And traditional and conventional wisdom would say, well, your internal subjective feelings and ideas are more subject to change than the objective externals, and so you should really like conform yourself to reality. And we've seen this reversal where it's actually, no, we need to change the outside world around us to match more closely my internal subjective preferences. Like everything around me needs to conform to the way I feel. And I think that's, philosophically problematic, but it's also just not sustainable. Like you can only do that so far, and I think we very quickly reached the limit of that.
Well, I think I want to add a sort of personal addendum here, which is, I have a number of transgender, individuals in my life, and they're people that I love and care about and want to see them do well. And I think that the idea that we would do, particularly operations that are irreversible, that do cause damage, that do come with side effects that people are often not, educated well about. This is a travesty. This makes me very sad for these people in my life, who I care about. So this is not a transphobic, like, get rid of them, like this
No.
is really stemming from a place of wanting to see better and sort of weighing out what the state's role in all this is. So Ben, I have one last question for you. Should this be a state issue or a federal issue? Is this something that we should say, like, hey, you know what? If California wants to do it, then they can do it. And if Kansas doesn't, then they can outlaw it. The court seems to want to make this a state issue. The Senate right now is wanting to make it a federal issue. What do you think?
So I would like to see it be a federal issue in our favor for the sake of those involved. I think, similar to you, really the compassionate and caring perspective on this, I believe, is to want the best for these people, which means not allowing them to hurt themselves irreversibly. So from that point of view, I would rather it be a federal blanket ban on these surgeries. But considering, if that isn't an option, then I would be happy to make it a state issue, once again, moving the needle in the right direction. Even if it isn't the perfect solution, even if it does allow states like California to continue with these harmful practices, I think we need to take whatever option is going to move the needle in the right direction, whether that is federal or state.